The Mayo Experience.
That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience. DraftKings picks for the NFL Divisional Round Saturday, Sunday, combined together for one Super Slate contest. If you want to get into a draw for 20 DK dollars, here's what you do. You smash the like button for the episode. You leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section. Tell me your one must-play any position that, let's say you were playing 100 lineups. You would play this player in 100 of those lineups. I want to know who that player is at whatever position. If you want to get into a draw for 100 DraftKings dollars, what you do is subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast. Leave a 5-star review, DraftKings handle, and something you enjoy about this show. Boom. You'll be in that draw for 100 DK bucks. Winners announced on Monday's Pat Mayo Experience. So tune into that. Plus, if you're really into the DraftKings fever and it's not just football going on, golf is back. And if you want to get a head start on who to research for golf, highly recommend fantasynational.com. If you use the link fantasynational.com/PME, you get 20% off at Fantasy National, whether you do the weekly, monthly, or NWell. You'll get that 20% off. So highly recommend you go do that too. Joining me on the line, stealing my bit on his podcast of Worst Place, although he did give me proper credit, so I thank him for that. The Athletic's Jake Ciely. What's going on, my man?
Yeah, I did. I actually went through a whole 2-minute explanation of how it started and with Mark Ingram and why it is what it is. So it was a very long process explaining everything. So yes, I did give you proper credit. I tweeted about it. I thought it was a fun segment to do. We gave a Worst Place awards for the season. I was doing it with Will Fuller and I gave it to him, and I'm sure we're going to talk about him today. But here, I want to talk real quick. The strategy stuff you brought up last week, I actually did what we talked about because I missed on some of the chalk, or some of the chalk that I had, and I pivoted and I had Metcalf, Lockett, Wilson, and I think somebody else from the Seahawks. It might even be, it was their defense, because you even say they don't get a ton of pressure. I switched to those 4 and I ended up cashing. I didn't hit big, but I ended up cashing that lineup because I did exactly what you and I talked about last week.
Yeah, so what the whole purpose behind that discussion was if you're behind going into either this week too, that if you go through Saturday and you've used a couple of your guys and they haven't performed very well whatsoever, you're no longer going to win. That's not going to happen. But isn't it better to get your money back or min cash instead of taking a 0? So if you can identify who you know are going to be the popular players, and on the Sunday slate last week, Jake, it would have been like Michael Thomas and Drew Brees, right?
Right. Yeah, I pulled off the Saints, and that's why it worked out. Like, nobody expected the Saints to bomb like they did, and by pivoting to those 4, I mean, I moved other pieces because there was 4 pieces that I moved around, but I pulled out Drew Brees and Michael Thomas. I was also able to move up because I had a cheap guy in there. I think it was the David Moore call. It actually came off of him despite being in the Seahawks game. But to your point, you move those things around, and I actually tripled up. It wasn't a ton. I mean, it was only the $7 or $9 entry, whatever it was. So it wasn't a big payout. But as you mentioned before, instead of losing my money, I at least made like $15.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff, especially if you're playing like week after week after week on DraftKings, one of the best things you can, not one of the best things, the best thing you can do is win. But if you're not going to win and you know you're going to lose, just kick the can down the road and give yourself another bullet for the next week. People do not utilize the late swap enough or pay attention to that it is actually having the best picks is the most important thing that you can do. Sorry, we can't help you out with that. But what we can do is give you a strategy to at least, return your money into your account so you have another shot at it next week based on something that like 5% of people do. If that, it's shocking to me how few people utilize it.
It is, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, because we talked about it. I did it, and just as the proof in the pudding, to use that cliche, it worked out.
And it's much easier to do on a slate like this with only 4 games. You can do it on your regular NFL slate. After the 1 o'clock games are finished, if you're way behind, pivot off the chalk of the 4 o'clock slate. But there's still just so many games going on that it makes it more difficult to do. And things need to break your way, just like they did here. Seahawks players did really well. Saints players did really poorly. The Seahawks players outscored the Saints players, at least the ones that you would want to have in those games. If you had taken out Drew Brees and played Taysom Hill, I suppose that would have worked out as well too.
That's true. But the biggest thing, and I'm sure everybody's sitting there, well, you could have left him at what if the Saints did smash as expected? Well, I still would have came up with 0 because I was behind. I wasn't going to leap all the people who were also using the Saints, and that's why it's a viable strategy.
Yeah, you have to sacrifice the higher probability play for the lower probability outcome play. But it's not like it was 99% the 1% that the Saints players would outscore the Seahawks players. It's probably like,
right.
If we looked at actual range of outcomes and probability, it's probably like 60-40. I mean, anyone who's played fantasy football in the past knows that, hey, sometimes the best player in the best spot doesn't always come through.
No, and I'm looking at it right now. It's interesting enough. The Seahawks are the late game again, but at Green Bay, and there's a lot of options that you could kind of. I will dive in. I'm obviously going to talk about it, but I think this game opens up a lot of flexibility to be able to do that on either side.
Well, let's start position by position, and we'll kick it off with running backs. Derrick Henry, after his tremendous performance against the Patriots, smashing the slate at running back, comes in as the highest price guy. He is $8,200 on this short slate, followed by Dalvin Cook at $8,000, Aaron Jones at $7,400. Ingram is back at practice, that awful worst place Mark Ingram. So it does appear like he is going to play. As of right now, that could always change, of course, but he's $6,700. Damian Williams, $6,000. Colonel Mostert, he's $58,000. Travis Omer, he is $5,100, and Carlos Hyde, $5,000. Those are your guys, $5,000 and above from this slate. For me, honestly, give me Aaron Jones, give me Damian Williams, give me Carlos Hyde. Those are the 3 I want to use.
So I'm very much on Aaron Jones. Like, put it this way. I have nearly 100% ownership of Aaron Jones, and it's in the late game, but that gives you a good flexibility. Put it to what we were talking about. If he's in your flex at 7,400, there's a lot of flexibility. You could go there if you have a game, even if you waited and took somebody out of the Chiefs game, because that's probably going to be pretty chalky. That gives you some of that opportunity there, but I have a ton of Aaron Jones. I'm surprised. I'm going with Colonel Mostert and Mustard or however you say it. I like him a ton this week because I think people are still hesitant of Kyle Shanahan, and I don't know, what is it, like the last 2 or 3 games he's pulled this Tevin Coleman gets the first series nonsense, but Mostert still gets his. And I understand Mostert has to get his in the 12 to 15 touch range, but he gets it. He's been their best running back. And against the Minnesota defense, I think this game actually covers by the 49ers. And so I could be wrong with that. And if not, and this turns out to be a shootout, that could be a different thing, and you're not looking for much run. But I think Mostert's going to get his touches in this game. I think the Saints are going to be running the ball, or the 49ers are going to be running the ball. So I'm a Mostert guy. And then it's funny that you said Mark Ingram, you hate him, because I actually sprinkled in a decent amount of Gus Edwards, because I don't know that even if Mark Ingram plays, he gets the full touches or even makes it through the game.
That could be the possibility. And then, of course, it would be Gus Edwards. Although, if you look at the Titans, the easiest way to run on them, at least the most successful way to run on them throughout the course of the season, was off tackle. And the best runner outside of Lamar on the Ravens at doing that is actually Justice Hill. But they never use him. So it's tough to say.
Exactly. That's the problem, is they never use them. So, and you're 100% right in that. But of the 5,000 and up, I do like Damian Williams. I wish I could have put him in there. We're going to talk about my biggest problem, and I might as well jump ahead, because it kind of spells what happens to the rest of my lineup. If I go with Aaron Jones, I put in Lamar Jackson, and you put in Aaron Jones and Lamar Jackson, you do not have much flexibility left. And I can't find a way to get Aaron Jones and Damian Williams unless I go for a pure punt somewhere. And I already have a pure punt at one of the spots.
Well, I'm curious to hear who that is. So that's why I actually said that I'd be fading Henry and Cook. And like, I'm probably only like, oh yeah, if people want to get into the Pat Mayo Experience Listeners League, the link is in the description of this video and podcast. So I'll probably just play 3 lineups this week. Now that golf has returned, most of my DraftKings allocation of my bankroll is going towards golf and not football. Better at golf than I am at football. So that only makes a bit more logical sense for me. But I'll probably just play the 3 lineups in my contest, chuck them in the millie, chuck them in the 9, whatever. And that means, I need to be contrarian if I do actually want to have a chance of winning. And I do know that those 2 are, not only are the most expensive, they're probably going to be the most popular at running back as well. So Jones, if I do Jones, Hyde, and Damian Williams, that does free up a bit of money for me to use an expensive quarterback, or even potentially 2 expensive players, whether it be at receiver or whether it be at tight end. So that's probably the route that I'm going. It's funny you mentioned Mostert, though. It's not that I'm anti-Mostert, and I do fall into that camp where I don't know how it's going to be divvied up, although he's been so good, and this could be a really big breakout game for him. But Minnesota's actually quite good against the run. I actually think that at quarterback, I mean, if you can get up to Lamar, fantastic. That I'm more apt to probably go like Jimmy G, Kittle, Debo that way, and I'll save just a little bit of money on my most expensive players. Then I can fit in Jones, I can fit in Damian Williams, and it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, and I would like to get off Gus Edwards, but again, if I'm going with Lamar Jackson, like that's part of the plan here too, is that it's going to differ depending on what your opinion is. Like, don't listen to me. I went 1-3 last week. And I granted a lot of the people had the Saints. That's not a surprise. And a lot of people had the Patriots. I don't think those two big are the surprise. And I said Buffalo was a 50-50 toss up and they had a chance to win that game. So it's not like the picks were egregious. I am taking all the home teams, and I do think Baltimore covers as well. So, Lamar Jackson and Gus Edwards running the ball, and just with this game, to go back to what we saw towards the end of the season, everybody's like, what about if Lamar Jackson's out in the fourth quarter? Well, fine.
Good.
He's already scored 30 points. Exactly. He scored 30 points, and that's more Gus Edwards for me. So I'm kind of you can see why I'm kind of going down that road with the Lamar Jackson, Gus Edwards thing. And I just found a way to switch. I actually switched my defense, and it's a really good defense still at 3,000 when we get to it. I got Damian Williams in the lineup now over Mostert. So there you go.
Yeah, so that's a guaranteed loser. So definitely play Mostert at this point.
Yes. Now that I switched off.
if you had to pay all the way up, would you go Cook or would you go Henry? Because I think that in the potential game flow that we see here, I'm actually with you. I think that the Niners cover, and I think that the Ravens cover. On Sunday, I actually think that both of the underdogs cover. That's why I like Carlos Hyde a little bit. I had a lot of success earlier this year when the Texans played the Chiefs, and I know the Chiefs were banged up, but I played Carlos Hyde that week when no one else really wanted him, and that's how you get to the Chiefs. You run on them, and whether they're up or whether they're down, the Texans are poorly coached. They're just going to run anyway. So at least you know that he's going to get the ball. That's always a good sign. You just hope Deshaun doesn't steal his touchdowns near the goal line. But I think for me, strangely enough, and it depends on how you view the games. If you think that Tennessee can cover the 9, then Henry is a fantastic play. But where he doesn't do as much in the receiving game and they're such huge underdogs, I think I would rather play Cook over Henry, knowing that even if they get down by a ton, at least he'll still be on the field and involved in the receiving game.
100% what you just said. I mean, there's nothing to add to it. If I'm paying up, that's exactly everything, the reason behind it. And obviously, if I'm wrong about the Ravens covering, well, do everything you just said. Why am I still talking? I don't need to add anything. I just said 100%. You covered the entire thing.
So if you do have Aaron Jones and you find yourself into a situation where you are losing going into that final game and you have him in your flex spot. Now, obviously, let's say you didn't use him in your flex spot because you're a dummy or something like that. You have him in your running back spot. You can only pivot to another running back. Now, the entire running back slate from that game is now open. Do you pivot down to Lynch or Homer, or do you just go on to Jamal Williams?
I wouldn't go to Jamal Williams just because he is practicing, but I don't know how healthy he is, and I don't know if he's going to get his normal workload. I guess we can hopefully find out before then. Still Fridays to come. If he's 100%, I think Williams makes the most sense because we've seen games. And here's the thing, and for seasonal purposes, this is why I always hate Aaron Jones, is because whether this game script points to him or not, whether Jamal Williams plays or not, he's still all over the map with the use. When Jamal Williams was out, that was one of the biggest complaints people had at the end of the season was, oh, he was going to smash. Aaron Jones was supposed to smash that game. No, Jamal Williams. And it was a huge disappointment. So Jamal Williams just being out there, just on his own, if he is out there, if he's practicing fine on Friday, that's who I would pivot to, because one is there's probably a lot of people that will be on Aaron Jones, even if they're, not waiting or whatever reason, they're just going to be on Aaron Jones in general. So you have the immediate contrarian play. If Jamal Williams steals the 2 touchdowns like he has before or gets half the touches, I think that makes the most sense, because not only have you pivoted off something that nobody's doing, you're also going for the exact opposite of what a lot of cash or like a lot of chalk people will probably be on, and that's Aaron Jones.
Who is the cheapest running back you think you could use on this? Like, not that you will use, but you could use, because I'm looking at Duke Johnson at $4,700, but like, I see the case for Madison if you wanted to use him. Like, if it's another situation like last week and Minnesota tries to control this game by running the ball, he could fluke into like 8 touches and then he has to break one. But that's tough. Like that's a tough story to sell yourself. Like Coleman, maybe.
It's a tough. No, so I was about to say, you asked me the question, you named the only 2. I was about to go with that. It's the Duke Johnson, and then if I was going to go down, look, the Tevin Coleman, I just mentioned it. He keeps getting that first series, but then pretty much nothing after that. Actually, if you look at the last 3 games, what was it? It was like 5, 7, and or no, not even 7. 5, 5, 4. Then you go back to New Orleans, 3 carries. He gets that first series, and then Coleman's done. I don't know. I still don't understand what the hell Shanahan's doing with that and why he continues to do that. He's almost like the opener in baseball. But what if Tevin Coleman takes one of those runs? Or what if Coleman looks really impressive on 3 of those touches, and then Shanahan being Shanahan, he's done it times before this year. Matt Breida in the mix, Juszczyk gets involved. You go back to Jeff Wilson at the beginning of the season. What if all of a sudden is Tevin Coleman getting 12 touches? And I only said 12, I didn't say 20. So that's why he would be the only one that I would consider if you're really paying down.
Well, if you're going to pay down, and running back is likely not the position that you want to do that at, one of the 2 Niners guys is the move. It's Coleman or it's Breida, and you just hope the 5% outcome that you're looking for hits. And maybe that's what you want to do in a tournament like this. Leave some money on the table, use one of those guys. No one's going to own them.
No, 100%. Actually, I was going to say it might be Jeff Wilson.
Yeah, but at least we'll know if he's active or not. If he's active, he's probably going to score a touchdown because he always does.
2, like it's a very potential. So yeah, I think that's who you're looking for. But as you said, if you're going to, you don't really want to. Last week just proved it. We talked about this on the show last week, and I mentioned that Joe Holka talks about it all the time. Last week, the way you won was paying up for running backs, just because you try to hit at wide receiver. You can hit with those big guys at running back. Now, this week is a little bit different. You and I already talked about it with Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook. Feel a little bit dicier than they do last week, especially more so Henry than Cook. But maybe you pay up for Cook and Williams, or pay up for Cook. And I don't want to do Mark Ingram just because of the health concern, but there's a potential there that he stays out there for 15, 20 touches, and 15, 20 touches from your most hated running back of all time is still, that's going to be somewhat contrarian in itself.
If Ingram misses the game, obviously everyone will move on to Gus Edwards. Do you think that there'd be any validity into playing Justice Hill?
Absolutely. But it's you're writing a script there. You already mentioned moving outside and that you have better success, but you're also writing a script where Tennessee stays in contention, and then that you have to pass more for Baltimore, and they can't just run, because Justice Hill has a little bit more value in the passing game, but also getting out into that space off the edges. So there is, but you're writing a scenario for it, which you've done before, as you just mentioned in the show. So I could see it, and it's going to be the move to make if you don't want to be chalk with Gus Edwards. But sometimes our good friend, Chris Meany, he says a lot of times when we were doing the DFS podcast, chalk isn't always a bad thing. And to go back to even last week's lineup, if you looked at the winners, they had I think one of the positions was like 2 points, 2.3 points or something like that scored. You don't, at a 4-game slate and something like this, you don't have to hit 15 plus points at every single position.
No, and especially all 4 games last week hit the under, so there wasn't a whole lot of fantasy points to go around, and there was just weird pieces from some of those games that started scoring touchdowns that legit no one had.
Yeah, and you know what? It's not uncommon for that to happen 2 weeks in a row in the playoffs. Somebody's probably going to score a touchdown. I'm looking down this list. I mean, would it surprise everybody if Dalvin Cook gets vultured by Mike Boone? I'm not saying go use Mike Boone for his 3 carries, but I'm just saying, you mentioned the touchdowns, and there's a lot of scenarios here where you can see random people scoring, and especially we haven't even talked about it yet, but we get the tight end. Some random ass tight end is going to score a touchdown.
Oh, you like your boy Ferkser? Hardly knew her.
Oh my God, that was so aggravating for somebody that was so on Jonnu Smith, and also did the over/under bet of 2 receptions, and 70% of the time he had over 2 receptions. You would take that bet every single time. Well, now it's whatever 7 out of 11 is instead of 7 out of 10.
Yeah, well, it happens. But I mean, if the Boone King ends up vulturing a touchdown from both Madison and Cook, that'll be bad. I actually think it would be more likely CJ Ham steals the touchdown, and everyone's like, "Oh my God."
He was out there too. That would be awful. I'm looking down further. I think Jeff Wilson's probably the most likely though.
Yeah, I mean, that means it's definitely, now that he's been identified as the most likely, just watch out for your main man, Kyle Jerzrick, scoring touchdowns.
The juice.
Yeah, the juice. Wide receivers. Let's discuss these guys. Devontae Adams, I actually think is objectively the best play on the slate, but he's $7,800. That's tough. Tyreek, 76. Hopkins, 74. DK Metcalf, 68. Tyler Lockett, 66. Thielen, who has this ankle stitch problem, looks like he's going to play. He's not practicing on Thursday, though. $6,200. AJ Brown, down in price. He's now 6,000. Diggs, 56. Sanders, 54. Debo, 52. I think value-wise, Debo's my favorite play out here. Minnesota's secondary is still awful, despite the fact that the Saints couldn't take advantage of it.
Yeah, I don't understand what was going on with the Saints last week. And I actually asked D'Angelo Williams about that on the podcast, and he talked about some of the coaching before the week, and it's just tough. Some teams don't know how to change mid-game. I'm with you. Debo is the other one with Aaron Jones that I have a ton of exposure to. To go to the Minnesota side of things, you and I've talked about this on the show several times throughout the year. And what do we always talk about? Kirk Cousins. You want Diggs when you have a team that's facing them with quarterback pressure. You want Thielen when he has time to think. Now, obviously, Thielen's injury kind of mixes this up a little bit. If Thielen's out, now Diggs becomes dicey because the 49ers could just cover him. And, okay, Kyle Rudolph and the rest, go ahead and try to beat us. Old BC Johnson, whatever. But as you and I have talked, you make Kirk Cousins think quickly. Who's he going to? He's going to Diggs because he breaks freer quicker, and he's got that short space and that immediate separation. So Diggs is the one that I want this week if I'm going for that game. If I can pay up, actually, you said Devontae Adams objectively. I think that Tyreek Hill's in the same conversation for how many big plays that the Houston Texans defense gives up. I know they've been playing better, but the big plays is where they've always been exposed. Exploitable is the word I was trying to think of.
Yes, and especially on a small slate like this, someone like Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, and Tyreek Hill, and I would throw Kittle into that mix. They feel like the 4 potential slate breakers because they are on main slates. You put them on a shorter slate, they most definitely are. Did I say Will Fuller? He's one of them too. That could absolutely break this slate. That doesn't mean you have to play these guys. That if they do, and you don't have them, just be wary that they could go off to the point where, if you don't have them, you automatically lose. And Hill's price is baked into that. I just think that the Texans secondary is just putrid. I think I would, if forced to pick between the two, I think I'd rather have Adams than Hill, only because I can take Hardman at $4,100, who is discount Tyreek Hill.
And that's a fine option. So if you're going to have to go that far, I could see it. I sighed when you said Will Fuller because I can tell you the truth. I can tell you right now, he's not going to hit. You know why he's not going to hit?
People are on
because
him?
I'm on him.
Yeah.
No, I'm on him.
Oh.
Every time I've only picked like twice. You know how much I hate him. He is my worst place. I hate Will Fuller. He is the new Jared Cook because Jared Cook is actually found what I don't know how some consistent. Well, we do know how Drew Brees and the Saints, some consistency this year, but I hate Will Fuller. He had 2 weeks was 60% of his production for the entire season. Outside of that, I don't think he ever topped was it 60 yards somewhere around there. But the 2 times I tried to get involved, I said, you know what? This is a good matchup. But, people are too frustrated, so I'll get on. Didn't hit. The 2 times where he did hit, I wasn't even on him because I was so annoyed and pissed off like everybody else. So I've talked myself into him in this opportunity. The Chiefs' pass defense is actually really good. And you mentioned about running it, but that's when I'm like, he's questionable. The people know that the Chiefs' pass defense is good. He can break the slate at 5,000. And because I went Lamar Jackson, I'm putting him in. So he's not going to hit.
I guess the only other one, I like Hollywood Brown because he's like Will Fuller Jr., but if he's not going to be playing in the slot, that's
he's more Tyreek Hill Jr.
Yeah, even so, I was going to say Logan Paul. Logan Ryan is probably going to end up taking. They might task him with Mark Andrews. I doubt that it'll most likely be Willie Snead, but if you have Hollywood Brown on the outside, it only takes one with him, just like it does.
It does only take one.
You
know who could honestly break this slate?
Sammy Watkins.
There you go.
Yeah, first game narrative. First game of the regular season, 200 yards. Go. First game of the playoffs, 200 yards. You're looking good.
You took the words out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to say. You know what the funny thing is? He's 4,300. I'm paying up $200 more to put Alan freaking Lazard in my lineup.
Oh, it's funny you hit on Lazard because it does look like Fuller's going to play. If Fuller doesn't play, Stills isn't awful. And maybe the move is to pivot off of Debo and just use Emmanuel Sanders. I still prefer Debo. I think he's the better play, but I know he's going to be more popular. Watkins is interesting. You could build a scrub wide receiver roster this week if you wanted to pay up at every other position.
I think you still have to let one go because I'm looking at my lineup right now and I paid up at tight end and I had to let one go. I couldn't do everywhere.
No, but if you wanted to make Debo your highest priced wide receiver, and then if you use Debo, Hardman, And
Oh, so you're really going down low. Because right now I have Debo, Fuller, and Lazard.
okay, so the lowest you're going is 4,500. I think you can dip below that. Like, I'm not even completely against some, like, if I'm going to use this 49ers passing stack, which I've kind of talked about, instead of using Debo in all three lineups, maybe I go Kittle, Garoppolo, and Kendrick Bourne, who they use in the red zone. Like, Kendrick Bourne is the perfect type of guy to break this slate. Like, the cheap guy who ends up with like 3 catches and 2 touchdowns. Like, he's that guy.
He is. I gotta be honest. The other one, I would go back to him despite the fact that he had 1 catch for 6 yards last week. What are the Ravens' pass defense has the same? We talked about this on the show. I've brought it up, I think, 2 or 3 times by now. The Ravens secondary and the Patriots secondary, one similarity. They are vulnerable over middle short. Tajay Sharp. And I'm like, look, it's going to probably be like a 1.2 points on today, but similar to, if I'm going down that low, I would rather go him than Kendrick Bourne, honestly.
Yeah, I would much prefer Kendrick Bourne in this spot. You see Jaron Brown's returning to practice. Looks like he's going to play. That takes all the heat off like David Moore, right? No more David Moore because those guys will probably split snaps.
Yeah, it would. And David Moore wasn't that. He's in the same conversation the 2 guys we're talking about right now.
I mean, if he's not playing to the extent that he was playing the past few weeks without Jaron Brown, like David Moore wasn't even all that bad last week. 2 for 57 is pretty good. He almost snuck in.
No, it did, but it still wasn't. It wasn't something that helped you win. So yeah, I'm with you in the fact that if Jerron Brown's back, I'm not screwing around with that.
Better $3,000 play. 2 guys that do things every now and then. Miles Boykin at 3,000 or Marquez Valdez-Scantling at 3,000.
So Boykin's my boy. I'm actually wearing a Notre Dame hat, as a matter of fact. And that's not because I'm a Notre Dame fan, because you know this. I crapped all over everybody and crapped all over, what's his face? Equinemius St. Brown. I told him that people he was going to be terrible. I can admit when Notre Dame doesn't have a lot of NFL talent coming out outside of offensive linemen and tight ends. Like the rest of the crew, usually not that great, especially running back. But one thing is Miles Boykin, you got to remember, they invested high draft capital in him. They see him as the future. He is where he is because he's still a little bit raw coming out of Notre Dame, but he's in that Anquan Bolden mold for me. And if you're looking for an opportunity, the biggest problem here is he's behind Marquise Brown. He's behind Mark Andrews. He's behind Willie Snead, and he's in an offense that throws 180, 200 yards. So if something were to break that way, I mean, Miles Boykin would be the one that I would go to just because based on pure talent and for this team might be running. Hell, he's not coming off the field as we saw because of week 17. He's not coming off the field if Robert Griffin comes in. Miles Boykin might even be out there even more.
Yeah, that's true. But with MVS, you might get your deep shot and you have to hope he doesn't drop it, but that's what you're praying for. You're praying for like 1 catch for 70 yards and a touchdown.
And you're praying Aaron Rodgers can actually put it on him. Screw it. I'm not messing around with the Geronimo Allisons and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I'll either go up to Lazard or Miles Boykin. I'm not messing around with Marquez Valdez-Scantling, which means he's the better player than Will Fuller. So everybody out there you go.
I would even think that in this game, Jimmy Graham is like a live option in that passing offense over MVS or Allison. And not that I want to play Jimmy Graham.
Jimmy Graham has to be alive first for that to happen. Like, seriously, Jimmy Graham hasn't been anything for a while. Somebody brought that up to me on another show and said, well, it's facing Seattle, the only other team that's really vulnerable besides Arizona against the tight end. And I'm like, there you go.
Revenge game, Jimmy Graham.
Yeah, so there's a lot of you can bake into this.
Boykin, week 16, played 37% of the snaps. That's not what I'm looking for. Seth Roberts actually played 50% in that game. How much is Seth Roberts?
I think he's even cheaper, or he's right around there.
No, I mean, they're the minimum.
No, he's 35.
No,
he's 35.
Too expensive.
Too pricey.
Too pricey for me.
How about
God,
Khalif Raymond?
Of all these guys, I'd actually just rather play Kendrick Bourne. I don't hate Kendrick Bourne. I think he's a fine play here.
No, I definitely think it could be. The funny thing is if you go down because they are listed by game order, once you get to min price, you might get Marquez Valdez-Scantling on low ownership because he's all the way at the bottom.
Yeah, potentially. Is Humphreys playing? Is he back?
I think he's still out.
Poor guy,
isn't he?
Hump Daddy. Let's see. I'm looking it up right here. Yeah, he did not practice on Wednesday or Thursday, so don't expect him on the field.
Tajay Sharp and Khalif Raymond.
It's funny. Like we just kind of glossed over everyone at the top. I said I like Adams over I like Hill. I think I like Lockett over Metcalf this week. I like Debo over Sanders. Do you just play AJ Brown and hope for the best?
No.
No?
No, I think the same thing happens what we saw last week. You're talking about one of the best secondaries in the league since they got Marcus Peters. And he just, again, take them away, because if you're the Ravens, you have a better run defense, and it's not world beating. People are going to look at that, but remember that touchdowns don't mean everything just because the Patriots only gave like 1 or 2 up head into that game. The Ravens are stronger as a total unit versus just, anyway, that all being said, the Ravens can slow down everything, including Derrick Henry, better than the Patriots can. So I think that you see the same type of game plan from the Ravens where it says, you know what, fine, we'll let you give the ball 30 times to Derrick Henry to try and beat us, because it doesn't matter. Even if we are as sucky as the Patriots at stopping him, we're putting up 30 points anyway, unlike the Patriots. So I just don't see A.J. Brown doing anything. I don't see Jono doing anything. I just don't see the passing game doing anything.
Okay, so let's talk about tight ends then. There's 3 of them that are good, and then there's the rest of everyone else. And the pricing does reflect this. So Kelsey's the highest price, but he's only $6,400. Kittle's $62. Mark Andrews is $56. I think that all 3 of those guys are really good plays and objectively way better than everyone else on this slate. But then you got like Hollister at $4,000, significant decrease. Fells, Hurst, Jonnu, Rudolph, Jimmy Graham, Nick Boyle, they're all in the $3,000 area. I don't even really want to get down to like the Irv Smiths of the world, or the Jordan Thomases, like, or the Ferkskers and like all that stuff. Like, who do you use at tight end? If you were to pay up for one of those 3, which one is it?
I'd pay up for Mark Andrews. Because, you look at it, and DraftKings has that opponent rank against George Kittle, against the Vikings defense is as bad as it is against the pass. Unlike the Ravens and the Patriots, the one area where they've been able to play decently because of their linebackers like Kendricks and all of that type of stuff, they're pretty solid against the tight end. Like, even when I do my adjusted points allowed, as you know that I have the APA over at the site, is the tight ends have always ranked higher for the Vikings versus their overall pass defense against wide receivers, where they're at number 1 or number 2 for most of the year. So I am a little bit skeptical of Kittle. Look, Kittle is not a bad play. I'm just saying, when you're trying to break the tie here, you're going to give me Andrews at 600 less and 800 less than Kelsey, which is the best matchup of the 3. I'm going to just go to Mark Andrews also because I have Lamar Jackson. I'm going down that route anyway.
If you did not use one of those 3 guys, or you used a second tight end in your flex, of all the rest of the guys, and let's throw Hollister out because he's a bit more expensive, of the $3,000 guys, I think my option would be Jimmy Graham, and I don't like that.
It would be mine too, and I don't like it either. I don't even want to like this feels to me like everybody jumping all over Tyler Eifert when they faced the Cardinals early this year. Like, it's still a crappy tight end. So, yeah, the opportunity is there, but 4 times, and yeah, everybody's going to always say, well, I'll take 12 out of 16 every single time. Well, that's over the regular season if you want to plug in whoever's facing the Cardinals every single week, but that's not the similar situation. It's a 4-game playoff slate. So it would be Graham. But as I already mentioned, I don't feel great about it. Graham's looked awful. Aaron Rodgers doesn't look very good. Maybe they surprise us. They've had the bye week. Maybe they get on track and Seattle helps, but that's who it would be, because the problem is I do like Fells, but it's always the problem with Fells is not knowing if it's going to be him or Akins. Obviously, Akins being questionable. Akins is out. I might actually go Fells over Jimmy Graham.
Yeah, Fells at 3,500 isn't a terrible play whatsoever, especially because that game total is at 51, that you just think that there's going to be points scored. So that brings us to the stacks. And I think a lot of these questions can really be answered by who you use at quarterback. Because if you use Garoppolo at quarterback, your decision is pretty easy at tight end because you probably use Kittle along with him over one of the other 2. If you use Lamar Jackson, you use Mark Andrews. You're using Mahomes, use Travis Kelce. Like, that just makes a lot of intuitive sense. Lamar's $8,400 though. I still don't know if that's too expensive or too cheap.
So for me, I think it's just right. Like the porridge. It's like you're talking about, I'm looking right now. You're talking about a 6-point per game gap between him and Deshaun Jackson. And then Deshaun Jackson's 1,700 cheaper. So I understand it, but when you have the upside for 40 points and the floor essentially is 20, like I said, I plugged them in. I see every argument not to, because Russell Wilson against the Packers, Deshaun Watson, we just mentioned his price. Deshaun Watson, if he's going to run like he did last week and put his body on the line to help this team win against the Chiefs, he might be the best play because of the price. But Lamar Jackson is just so hard to he kind of feels like what we were doing with Christian McCaffrey earlier this year. Until he gets to $10,000, I don't even think there's a hesitation.
I like Jimmy Garoppolo for his price. I think he allows you to do so much in your lineup because he's in the mid 5,000s.
He is, but the 2 games, is against the Cardinals. And yes, this is a similar matchup, but well, maybe the Vikings did something that smarter minds than you and I saw last week with still the same talent, but maybe they schemed a little bit differently. Like I didn't dig into that game this much, getting ready for our trip, and baseball is coming around, stupid baseball. But in any case, we've talked about that game. The Saints were supposed to go into that game and pass, because that's what everybody does. And whether or not you want to blame it on Drew Brees' arm not being able to get it down, Drew Brees still had tons of really good games this year. Michael Thomas didn't blow away the wide receivers because Drew Brees was a crappy quarterback the entire season. Something was different in that game. I'm not going to put it all in the Vikings defense, but I paint all that picture just to say, well, what if the Vikings play as good as they did last week? I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is a better quarterback than Drew Brees, even with his arm.
No, but at the same time, I think that might keep people off of Jimmy Garoppolo. And I'm trying, if I'm only going to play 3 lineups, I'll probably play 2 of one stack and 1 of another stack. So do I want to do the Lamar Jackson, Hollywood Brown, Mark Andrews stack? Do I want to do the Mahomes or potentially the other side with Watson? I'm trying to think a bit more contrarian here because I'm using so few lineups and I'm not playing cash games. I'm playing GPPs. So for me, I think you could even make a case to play Garoppolo by himself because trying to pair him up.
Naked Garoppolo
would be very sexy. I'm not going to lie to you about that. But like if you just use Garoppolo and Kittle, you really hope everything goes through Kittle. But even if you did a triple stack of Kittle, Debo, and Garoppolo, I mean, what if Sanders and Kendrick Bourne end up doing everything? Like, there are so many different options in that offense to score touchdowns, not necessarily to pile up the receiving yardage, but to really hit your potential upside. Is that I just think it's so much easier to pass all over the Vikings than it is to try to run on them.
No, you're 100% right about that. I'm just saying that I'm painting why I don't feel great about it. I understand everything you just said, and you're chasing that upside, but it was basically like 2 or 3 games this year where Garoppolo really, and you're looking at even those great games, Garoppolo is kind of in the average for what Lamar Jackson does. So that's why I paid up for Lamar Jackson. And that's one of the things I looked at. I'm like, all right, let me check the ceilings of all these guys. And you look at the ceilings, and the ceilings are like Lamar Jackson's average. The one thing I will say, you didn't really touch on that game, and I'm kind of curious if this is why. So the Russell Wilson and the Aaron Rodgers, so the Russell Wilson stack I don't like because it's cold and it's on the road. Now it's supposed to be in the 20s. So the 35, I always talk about this, the 15, 25, 35 is, so 15 plus wins, you got to consider it a little bit. 25 plus wins, you start to get scared. 35 and below hurts the passing game too. Even if there is no win, even if there's no snow, 35 and below hurts the passing game a little bit. I think it hurts Russell Wilson more than it hurts Aaron Rodgers, but it still pulls me off Aaron Rodgers because what's the stack with Aaron Rodgers? Adams, Graham?
No,
like,
I think you would just, I think honestly, the stack with Rodgers is Rodgers, Adams, Jones.
Yeah, but that limits a lot of what you're going to be able to do.
In terms of overall lineup construction, yes, you're right. You're going to have to punt somewhere, but I think those would be the 3 if I was going to roll out a Packers stack.
Okay, and I can see that, but I think that the stack for that game, and maybe that's one of the things too, is, look for ownerships for this, and, if you do the Aaron Rodgers, see, that the only thing that worries me about that too, if you do the Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, you've already locked in your contrarian, and you don't give yourself that flexibility we talked about earlier. Like, you're already on a contrarian play into the last game of the week.
True, but that inherently makes the rest of your lineup different, that, you wouldn't have to pivot off of anything. Like, you just take whoever at that point.
Right, but but you also would know going into that game, if you already haven't hit, you're probably not hitting, period.
Sure, but I mean, the whole point is, like, at that point, you're hoping that's the game that goes off. And if we look at the totals for these games, like, it's very clear that most people are going to take the players from the Texans and Chiefs game. That game is projected for 4 more points than the next closest one. It's at 51 right now as the over-under. The next 2 closest of that Seattle Packers game at 47, Titans and Ravens is 47, with a huge implied number on the Ravens over the Titans because it's 9.5. And then you have Vikings and Niners, which is just down at 44. But as we saw last week, all 4 games hit the under. So just because you're a 44 doesn't mean you can't be the highest scoring game on a 4-game slate.
Right. 100%. The funny thing is I think I've only got one. Yeah, I have one. No, I have Will Fuller, stupid Will Fuller. Davey Williams and Will Fuller in that game. I only have 2 pieces in that game. So mine's already a little bit contrarian.
Cousins, Rodgers, or Watson would you use?
Oh, Watson.
Okay, Cousins or
Definitely.
Rodgers? Like, is there any chance you would use Kirk Cousins?
So that's the. Why don't you just get to the question?
Okay, here's the question: Cousins or Tannehill?
Tannehill.
No one's going to use Tannehill, and he's the cheapest quarterback.
And here's the problem. Why? Is because look at last week, 15 attempts. And what are you going to try to do? You're going to try to run Derrick Henry, play ball control, just smash it up the middle. The pass defense that we mentioned has been really good since they got Marcus Peters. And Tannehill, if he only throws the ball 15 times, that's the downside. The entire team had 9 completions. There's only one person with more than 1 reception, freaking Fersker. And then this entire team as a whole, or maybe he's the most in yards and there was somebody else. But in any case, a lot of ones across the board. The thing about Tannehill that's good, though, is that if he only attempts the ball 25 times, he's probably completing like 16, 17, and for at least 2 touchdowns. So that's what you're shooting for there. And that's why I would go Tannehill in that situation, because the price, as you mentioned, nobody's playing him. And if he is super efficient as he has been for the majority of the season, then you kind of hit over everybody else.
Well, and you deal in the reality is I think that's a very easy game-to-game stack if you want to do it. Now, it's a lower percentage play, obviously, but if you don't use Derrick Henry and you use Ryan Tannehill, I think you very obviously use A.J. Brown with him. Use those two. And if that's the case, since you cannot use Lamar, bringing it back with that awful Mark Ingram is probably the move. Or Edwards, or just a piece of the running game. You know what I mean?
No, Edwards. I didn't say that. Is that what you were doing?
Yeah. But I just, in that case, you would have to hope the Ravens get up a bunch by running the ball.
Right.
And Lamar doesn't score. And then the Titans are playing catch up for 3 quarters. And through attrition, Tannehill just
and then
piles
you would
up.
play A.J. Brown.
Yeah. So that would be the move there. But I think that's so unlikely that you probably don't want to go to.
I know. So I'm looking at like the reasons to do it, and that's
well, you got to tell yourself you got to tell yourself a story of this game. And if you think that the Titans win this game or this game is close, it's presumably by Derrick Henry. So that like you would have to think that like Ravens get up by 24 early. Somehow Lamar doesn't do all of the damage, and then maybe he throws to like Hayden Hurst. Or Nick Boyle, something like that, or it's that Ricard guy on like a 1-yard sneak or something like that.
Patrick Ricard,
and that's how, Captain Ricard. You get him in there, and that's how they score. Then they have to pass the entire time, but that's like a less than 5% outcome.
Well, there's your narrative. They're bringing a show back. Star Trek. He hasn't aged in 75 years.
He's a good-looking man for an old dude.
Dude, we were having this debate during the games last week. Do you know what a young Patrick Stewart looks like? Nobody does.
No, it's like Gene Hackman. Like Gene Hackman has never been young.
He's just exactly same thing. It's like you've only known him, and he hasn't. Patrick Stewart looks like the same he did 30 years ago when that show was actually on TV.
You see, the key is if you're gonna go bald really early, so people think that you're 20 years older than you actually are. So by the time you actually catch up to the age that people think you are, people are like, man, he looks great for 75, but it turns out you're only like 45.
That's a really good. So what you're saying, if you think you are, just start shaving it.
Exactly. Or like dye your hair gray or something.
All right. Fair enough.
Defenses. Which one are you using?
49ers.
Niners. 3,000. Yeah. That does. If you can get to the Ravens, that also feels like a pretty good spot.
See, but to go back to what I said, it doesn't feel so great for me because just smash Derrick Henry. And why? If they're only passing the ball 15 times, where's your opportunities for turnover? So
yeah, but
I know
that game, like again, that game was really close the entire time. You'd want to load up. You'd want to load up with the Ravens against the Titans if you think the Ravens are going to blow them out.
I don't even think that they even go too aggressively that way. And it's Tannehill. The one thing about Tannehill is that he's pretty smart. He's kind of similar to like the Teddy Bridgewaters of the world, where he's not going to make too many. He's not Jameis Winston. He's not going to make those kind of. They're Daniel Jones making those kind of stupid moves, or Josh Allen. So I just don't see the price. I understand what you're saying. I just don't see for the price for $600 cheaper to go against Kirk Cousins, who does make poor decisions, who sees an open receiver and goes to the guy 10 yards further past him, who's double covered because he's aggressive like that. And in a game where I do think the 49ers are a good chance to cover that game, where you have the same type of scenario, I think that the Kirk Cousins risk factor over Ryan Tannehill risk factor points to the 49ers defense, and the 49ers are 600 cheaper.
For me right now, I agree with you. The 49ers are probably the best value on the board. I also think that they're going to be the most popular. And as we talked about, this is a great spot to go contrarian even with a bad defense. Because we talked a little bit about the Titans last week. They were the cheapest. And it takes so little to be the best defense on a short slate like this. You know what it takes? A touchdown. And what did the Titans do? They had a pick six, and it made them the best defense. And they saved you all the money in the world. So I think they're just trying to use trying to use the lowest owned defense, or one of the 3 lowest owned. And I think I might gravitate towards the Packers in this situation.
I could see it, but that's another one where was Russell Wilson really going to turn the ball over? To your point, I brought him up last week and you poo-pooed me. Only 3 points fewer than the Titans, and the Seahawks scored 11. So if you're going to go back to it, why not go back to the Seahawks with the way that Aaron Rodgers has been playing?
Potentially. I mean, I actually really do like Kansas City just because they bring immense pressure and they should be up in this game. And Deshaun Watson takes sacks anyway.
That's true. So if you don't get the turnover, at least you get the sacks there. If you can get up to the Chiefs probably would be my second choice. I'm not a big fan of the Packers against Russell Wilson, but I know I talked about before the cold but again, Russell Wilson, when is he ever going to throw the ball throw for 3 interceptions?
No, it's just the sacks that goes along. Like the teams that are sacked the most remaining in terms of pass protection, like the Titans have been sacked the most overall of all the teams left, but a lot of that was Mariota over Ryan Tannehill, although that does make the Ravens a pretty safe floor in terms of sacks. After that, you have Houston, who takes a bunch of sacks. You have Seattle, who takes a bunch of sacks. And then every other team. Here's this tricky one. The Niners are now the next worst in teams getting sacked, and the team that presents the best pressure defensive line left in the playoffs is actually Minnesota.
Is Minnesota number 1? Because I thought I looked the other day and I thought the 49ers were number 2.
Oh, maybe it is the 49ers. Maybe I just kind of glossed. Oh, yeah, they are number 2. 49ers number 2, Minnesota number 5. Sorry about that. But like the Vikings did an excellent job getting in the backfield against Drew Brees last week, and the Saints have one of the best offensive lines in football.
I was just about to say, I mean, that might be the one where I think to go straight contrarian and you're already taking this is go back to baseball, like where a lot of people, when they stack Colorado in Colorado and then you immediately just go to the other side of that game, and including like maybe even the pitcher, you don't do it for all your lineups, but to your point, if everybody's going to be on the San Francisco 49ers defense, you go to the Vikings defense and Dalvin Cook and boom, stack, works out. You've already played a contrarian lineup with just 2 pieces.
Yeah, I think if I was going to use the Vikings D, you would I don't say you have to play Dalvin Cook, but it makes a lot of intuitive sense. Especially with...
No, I'll say you have to.
Especially with Diggs,
100%.
with Thielen banged up and Diggs like dealing with an illness. Like, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, and like I said, I'll say what you did. I will 100%. You don't play the Vikings defense if you're not playing Dalvin Cook.
I mean, if you wanted to solo it, sure, why not? Hope for two return touchdowns or something. You
don't do naked defense. You do naked quarterbacks, not naked defense.
You can definitely do naked defense. You don't need to pair them with a running back. You don't have to. If you want to do if you want to do a stack and you want to use the Niners defense, pair him up with Richie James, double points.
That works sometimes.
Yeah, very rarely does the double dip come through. And usually if you do the double dip, you want to do it with a receiver who actually does something besides return punts.
That's what I was going to say. The Chiefs and Mecole Hardman.
That actually could work.
There you go.
Does he return punts? Does he return punts, or are they going to let Hill do that in the playoffs?
Or is it Hill, or did they start mixing Pringle in too?
Pringle and like Robinson was doing it for a bit too, but I think on kickoffs alone, Hardman does it. But you would probably want the punt returner because punts actually get returned. Where most of the time,
I'm going to check right now.
I think they've been switching it up.
That's what I think. I don't know who. I'm looking for the most common ones. The punt returner most common it's actually listed on their chart as Tyreek Hill backed up by Mecole Hardman.
I can see them almost like how Deshaun Jackson used to be deployed in the playoffs. I can see them using Hill in that situation because we're now in the playoffs. Like if it's close.
So there you go, Chiefs and Hill.
Chiefs and That works.
That's very pricey.
Yeah. All right, Jake, theathletic.com. Tell everyone about the podcast.
Yes. Yeah, there's a ton of them. Well, there's some of them pulled back. So the throwbacks twice a week still. That's with Meanie and Brad Ziegler. The D'Angelo Williams one, which is another great insight. He talked about for everybody out there that saw the game, because I'm assuming everybody did. He explained the whole throwing of the helmet by Diggs and the Lattimore arguing and yelling at the coaches and why that happened. Very insightful. It's always great listening to a player that will actually tell you what's going on and happening. So those are the 3 main podcasts. All in Sports will be back after our trip next week to Vegas for the FSGA. By the way, I also wore this Band Kickers t-shirt because I'm celebrating the XFL. No kickers, man. You can't kick an extra point. I love it. This is my new favorite league.
You're all in on the XFL.
I'm buying stock in the XFL. Let's go.
I mean, if you did that last time, you ended up broke.
I don't know, but I'm in this time. They're doing away with the kickers. I don't know if they still do kicker. Did they do field goals? I don't care. They got rid of them somewhat. You can't kick an extra point. I'm so happy.
I think last time that they also didn't. I don't know if you couldn't kick a field goal, but I knew you couldn't kick an extra point because if you started from like as I recall the rules, 'cause I actually went to an XFL game last time around.
Did you?
In Orlando. I saw the San Francisco Rage take on the Orlando whatever they were called. No, San Francisco
Sack
Demons
punchers or something.
San Francisco Demons against the Orlando Rage was the game that I went to. Was that the Orange Bowl? I think it was.
Demons and Rage.
Either way, that after you scored a touchdown, you could go for 1 point by starting from the 1 yard line, 2 points by starting from like the 4 yard line, or 3 points if you went from the 10.
They did something that's actually pretty similar to what they're doing now. I'm looking. Do they still have they still have the San Francisco Demons, or are those the old ones?
Those
are the old ones. Yeah, those are the old ones. So the Dallas Renegades. Where is there anybody in San Francisco? There's nobody in San Francisco. There's the Seattle Dragons.
Oh, the Dragon. Or it should be the Dragoons. That'd be a better name.
The Dragoons. That would have been good. The St. Louis Battlehawks.
Good names. I like
Oh,
these
so
names.
who's your favorite? Here's your names. The Battlehawks, Vipers, Dragons, Roughnecks, Guardians, Wildcats, Renegades, Defenders. Those are the DC team. And the Extreme. The Los Angeles Extreme.
I like they were called the Los Angeles Extreme last time, I believe.
Oh, so that might be an old team. It might just be those first 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. Yeah.
Yeah, because Tommy Maddox was the quarterback of the Los Angeles Extreme.
Good old Tommy Maddox.
XFL MVP, and then he went to the Steelers.
So yeah,
good.
Not the Extreme, the first 8 that I said. What's your favorite of the 8?
What was the
Renegades,
St. Louis one?
Roughnecks, St. Louis. What St. Louis were the Battlehawks.
I like that one. The
cool
Battle
logo
Hawks.
too. I do like their logo.
There we go. Maybe we need to be all in on the St. Louis Battlehawks.
Let's do it. St. Louis Battlehawks. They lost all their football teams anyway.
Although the DC Defenders in the movie Any Given Sunday, weren't they the Dallas Defenders? Wasn't that their name?
Were they?
I think so. That's the team that Willie Beeman played in the playoffs. Dallas Defenders.
Miami Sharks.
Yeah, I know it was the Miami Sharks. There was 2 Miami teams in Any Given Sunday. Defenders.
Oh, because that's what Miami needs. More teams that fans don't go to.
Well, you got the Albuquerque Aztecs. That's where Willie Beeman ended up.
By the way, did you know that the owner of the Albuquerque Isotopes is a huge Simpsons fan, and that's exactly why he named them the Albuquerque Isotopes?
I mean, I didn't know that for sure, but I knew they were named after the Springfield Isotope, so that made a lot of sense.
Yeah. That's exactly why
Albuquerque.
He did. He was the owner of the Norfolk Tides too. That's all because I did an internship there. That's why I knew about that. DC Defenders only have a capacity of 20,000. Ugh.
No, they were the Dallas.
Oh my God! Do you know who the head coach of the New York Guardians is?
Freddie Kitchens.
Kevin freaking Gilbride.
Really?
It's gonna be run, pass, draw on 3rd and 7. Run, pass, draw. Run, pass, draw. Good luck, New York Guardians.
Dallas Knights was the team in any game. Where am I
Dallas
getting Defenders
Knights
from? Maybe it's some sort
Bob
of
Stoops is the Dallas Renegades, and Mark Trestman is the Tampa Bay Vipers.
Mark Trestman, what a hero!
Dude,
he's completing the trifecta. He's now coaching the NFL, CFL, and XFL.
There you go. Pep Hamilton is the DC Defenders. Sure, everybody remembers him.
Remember when
Pep Hamilton I'm so into the XFL now.
What was Pep Hamilton was what, the coordinator in Indy and the head coach of Stanford? Isn't that what he did?
Was he? I just remember defensive, or not defensive. I mean offensive. He was Michigan's assistant head coach.
Pep Hamilton.
Cleveland Browns. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Cleveland Browns, Indianapolis Colts.
No, he was the Stanford OC. Yeah, he was
before that.
Yeah, Stanford wide receivers coach, Stanford OC. And it makes sense he's with Michigan because he's with Harbaugh at Stanford, wasn't he? Or wasn't he? I can't remember. All the years mixed together.
I don't know. Get you into the XFL. Let's do it.
All right, just to open up gambling, open up fantasy, and we're good to go.
Yeah, please do. I'm on the Battlehawks. Are you going to go to the DC Defenders or are you going to stick with the Battlehawks?
I'm going to go to the Battlehawks, I think. We need to be all in on St. Louis.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, Jake Ciely, follow him on Twitter at AllInKid. I will see you in Vegas next week, sir. And then I'll be back to cover DraftKings for the divisional round. Full slate of shows for the Pat Mayo Experience all week next week for golf and football, even though I'm gone. Who knew? And UFC, Conor McGregor. So stay tuned for the Dogger Pass podcast on the Pat Mayo Experience, DraftKings YouTube channel. You're going to want to check that one out to see who to bet on. This week, Conor's odds getting out of control. If you want to play in the Pat Mayo Experience Listeners League, link is in the description of this video and podcast. Let's fill that up. If you want to play some golf, especially on DraftKings, or just some betting, fantasynational.com/PME, get yourself 20% off. And that'll do it, unless you want to get into a draw for 20 DK bucks, which you can do by smashing the like button to this episode, leaving your DraftKings handle in the comment section. Tell me what player you have 100% exposure to, any position this week on the divisional slate of games. If you want to get into a draw for 100 DraftKings dollars, subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever. Leave a 5-star review, DraftKings handle, and something you like about this show, and boom, you're in the draw. Winners announced on Monday, which is the next time I'll see you. So good luck on the weekend, and I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!